Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be creating some procedural floor textures inside of Blender. So you can see we have our final material right here that we're going to be going over. There's really three methods that we're going to be covering when doing this video. And what we're going to be doing is building off of them, one off of another. You can see this concrete has cracks, it has bumps, it has dents, and also it's not tiling because of this random per island method that we're going to be going over. So like I said, there's really three basic methods with this, and we're going to be starting off with our first method, which is going to kind of be building this base material and working our way up to this. Okay, so you can see we have our kind of base scene right here. I just set up some emission lights, and then I have a little character for scale, and then we have a camera. So what we want to start doing here is we're going to just click on this plane right here, and we're actually going to just add a regular base material for now. I'm going to move this over. We don't really need to see that scene at all, just because we're going to be working in this rendered viewport for now. The first thing I want to do is I want to change the base color of this to a really dark black. Now this is going to be depending on your own personal preference and taste for how you do your materials. Technically, there's no such thing as a solid, perfectly black thing in the world, except for a black hole, but that's not an actual surface, most likely. So I always like to pull up just a little bit, but if you want to, you can go all the way down to 0. That's going to be totally up to you. Now what we're going to be doing is adding some surface imperfections just right off the bat. Now there's going to be some different kind of plugins right here that I really want us to pay attention to. So I'm just going to pull in a color ramp for each one. So we're going to put on a color ramp right here. And then we're going to just copy that 2 times. Control C, Control V. And then copy that again. And I want to plug this color ramp into our roughness right here. And then I want to pull this one into our normal right here. And for this to work properly, we need to punch Shift A, search, and we need to actually find our bump node. So let's pull in our bump right here. And there we go. So we're going to pull this into our height. And now we are ready for some image textures, just like that. So you can see we already kind of have a little bit of a difference going on right here. And that's just because we're mapping a gradient onto our surface. So we can kind of change the shininess of this floor right here with this roughness. And for now, I'm just going to unplug the normal, but know that we're going to plug our bump into our normal. So the first thing we're going to do when looking at references is kind of create these surface breakups. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can get these surface breakups and surface imperfections. I like to use Quixel. You can use, there's free resources out there for you to use as well. And I sometimes use them too, just depending on what I'm looking for exactly. For this floor, I think if we kind of maximize this, what we're looking for is this is a dirty metal. So it has some scratches, it has some bumps. That might be interesting for our roughness map. So we're going to go to files right there. And I'm just going to drag this into our folder right there. And it should copy over. One more time. Okay, perfect. Right there. And we're going to take our color map and plug it into our color ramp. We're going to Control Shift click on our color. And you can see we're clipping our blacks. So let's bring that down. And there we go. So now what we're doing here essentially is we're telling the roughness if it's black, there's 0 roughness, which means it's completely reflective. And what we can do is demonstrate this with an RGB right here. So we're going to take this RGB, we're going to put that in our roughness right there. And then we're going to Control Shift click on that. And we're going to bring this down to black. Click on our principal material and look, perfectly reflective. As we bring this up to white, it's going to become more and more diffuse, which means there's more and more breakup on that surface that's kind of scattering the light. Now, the problem is with just doing regular white like this is it's a perfect breakup that's uniform over the surface. The reason we're bringing in these image textures is because now we can take this color right here and we can map this onto the roughness and create this ununiform breakup on the surface right here. Now, this looks pretty good. However, this is an 8K texture, and right now it's not looking too bad as far as detail, but if I zoom in a little bit, you can start to see the pixels, and this might not be coming up through YouTube, I'm not sure, but trust me, they're there. So we're going to punch Control T with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, and we're just going to scale this by 2, 2, and 2. That way we get a little bit more resolution, there's still, there's now technically going to be some tiling, but since it's only scaled up by 2, you're not really going to see it. So now we can take our principal material, output that to the surface, and we got this really cool kind of breakup going on with our surface right here. So this is looking great so far. Another thing I want to do though is I want to add something to our bump because usually there's not just perfectly flat surfaces. So what we're going to do for that is go back over to Quixel, and we're just going to look around and see if there's anything in our bump that we might want to use. We have this stucco facade right here. It's pretty interesting. That might make a really cool floor texture, but not for what I'm trying to go for right here. We have damaged concrete, and I want to go that direction probably. Damaged concrete floor. Damaged concrete wall. So there's a lot of different options here, and this is kind of where I spend the majority of my time, most of the time, is just clicking through these and trying to find something that kind of speaks to me. All right, let's do this one right here, damaged concrete floor. So I'm going to download that and import that into Blender. So we're going to be taking this bump map from the damaged concrete, and the reason we're using bump is because we already have this bump node here, but also I want to be doing some mixing and matching later on, and the math for that's kind of complicated with normals, while as bump is just a regular black and white value. By the way, it wouldn't be a non-color right here for this, and that's just going to map better for us. What it's going to do is just make this bump behave more like a bump map than just an sRGB color space, which is basically going to give us more data for this material. So now that we have our bump right here, we're going to plug that into our color ramp, and we're going to output that. Okay, we want to also Control T this, and I'm just going to bring in these texture coordinates right here, and I'm going to link the UV to both of these to the same one. That way this is just going to be easier for us later on when we're trying to keep track of this big node structure that we're going to generate. So this is pretty fine, so let's maybe do like a 4 4 4 on this. That looks a lot better. Let's go ahead and put that bump into our normal, because we're converting the height right here into our normal, and then let's output that on our material. So now that you can see our bump map is plugged in, we got this very interesting texture going on, but we lost some of our shininess, which is why we have this color ramp right here. So I'm just going to take the blacks and pull them up while I output just this color, just the color of data of the bump map right here. You can see there's a lot of detail right here, and this is partly why the reason we're doing these image textures is because we want to be able to have all this detail, which noise textures really can't generate. And we somehow got turned upside down. Blender's being very painful to work with. There we go. So what we're going to do is just pull these black values up a little bit. There we go. Pull the white values down. And what we're going to do is actually create a new color ramp. And we're going to take this color ramp right here, and this is going to maintain our original values, and we're going to plug that into our height. And this new one is going to be our strength. So now if we take this off, plug that in there, we should be getting some more reflective areas, and I might just need to bring this down a bit to get that to show. There we go. We're getting a little bit more breakups in our surface. So this is kind of our first material right here, or our first structure. This is the first method. This should be good for, almost all the methods that you're going to need to just create simple textures, simple floor textures, or simple wall textures. But I personally, since the final scene we're going to be ending on is going to have so much detail in it, I personally want to create something that has a little bit more variation to it to make it feel a bit more realistic and add a little bit more interest into that big negative space at the bottom. So moving on to our second method, what we have here is just the same texture that we were working with earlier. Let me plug that back into our strength. That way we kind of get that same look we were going for. We have the same texture we were working with earlier. We're building on it now, and what we're going to do is add maybe some variation onto the surface, even more than what we have. What I was thinking is there could be some puddles around here. That's a very classic CG thing to do, is to add puddles on just big flat planes. The reflections make it very interesting. So we're gonna punch Shift A, search, and we're gonna bring in a color ramp. I'm gonna just plop that right there for now. Let's bring this down, and we're gonna punch Shift A again, and we're gonna bring in a noise texture. By the way, guys, don't get stuck on specific image textures. I know sometimes it seems like when you're watching videos, like you got to use that exact one. It's not important. The most important thing is how you work with them. Make sure you're working within the right scale, because some of these image textures are on different scales, and you just want to try to match them to get the most realistic look possible. So we're going to output our noise texture. We're going to take our factor, because that's our black and white values, and we're just going to plug that into our color ramp right there. And let's output that color ramp. So this is the base image noise texture that Blender comes with, and that's all we're going to need. First thing I always like to do is I kind of want to see more contrast in this image. So I'll just take this color ramp, pull the bottom up, pull the top down. And this is pretty interesting already, and if we wanted to, we could turn this into some puddles. So we're going to take this right here, take the color, plop it into the strength now of our bump map. We're going to no longer need this. We could add this back in later if we wanted to with the mix RGB, but what I want to do instead is mix this in with our roughness now. So we're going to search mix RGB, and we're going to plop that right here. This is going to be our mix value, or our factor, and this is going to be our color to our original roughness map, which is this right here. So when we get these two in here and we turn this black, we now have puddles appearing in these black areas, which is matching our original noise, which is also telling our bump map to have a strength of 0 there. So what that's going to do is that's going to give us a perfectly smooth reflective surface. I'm going to punch Control Shift click, do a material output. And now if we take this light right here, we can kind of slide that over, and you can see we have these puddles. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't look that convincing to me. In fact, it looks quite fake and a little strange, because we have so much high fidelity detail in this ground surface right here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so we can see that. We have this high fidelity detail in this ground surface, and then there's just this flat line that kind of comes through really lazily and kind of just cuts through all of that detail and kind of waters it down. So what we want to do is we want to go over to this noise texture and change some of the parameters of it. So first we have our scale, and I'm just going to Control Shift click right now and zoom out just so we can kind of see an overview of the scene. Sliding this up is going to make the puddles smaller. Yeah. Sliding it down is going to make the puddles bigger. Cool. Actually, for the scale of this scene, I think 5 was pretty nice, so I'm going to leave that there. Now, this is where we're going to really get some of those interesting details that we wanted. We're going to take our detail up to 15. Already now, if we go back to our principal material and we jump back in there, we're already getting a little bit more breakup that we're looking for, but we're not quite there yet. So we're going to bring our roughness up too. And now you can see those puddles breaking up. And then maybe our distortion up just a bit, 0.01 might be a good start. Let's go and output that original setting. And now we went from kind of this basic, boring puddle to these very interesting spots where it looks convincing that water would gather there like that. So what I'm going to do is output this right here and kind of let this render in a bit. We can change around how much puddle we have. So we're going to bring these white values down more, these black values down a little bit more, just a bit. And what we're really looking for is perfect white and perfect black. That way, whatever is mixing here is going all the way through on our color factor. So like that right there. So you can kind of see we have a puddle here, and then we have all these little imperfections around it. And same is going to go with our bump. When our bump mixes, we're going to get that same effect right there. Now if we Control Shift click on our principal material, you can kind of see we have these puddles all around the image, and there's a lot more detail in them. This is a lot more convincing, especially when we get at an angle like this, kind of a camera angle that you would take. Maybe something that I would like to do here even more is just modify this and bring it down a bit. Bring that down a bit more, just to take away some of the puddles. Awesome. So that is kind of our second method where we start to take noises and make it more procedural. And then we get these really, really cool, interesting puddles that you can see right here. And we still have that high fidelity detail that we're looking for in an image. So now let's say you want to do more than this. You want to kind of zoom out and capture a big, big scene, but you don't want a texture tile, which is something we're going to end up getting with this current method. That takes us to phase 3 or method 3, where we actually start sampling random per islands and kind of adding a little bit of geometry into our scene. Okay guys, now it's time to get a little messy inside of Blender, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to just add in a cube. So we're going to Shift A, add in a cube right here. Now this is specifically for floors, but you could do the same with walls or any other surface. Any surface that you're going to instance a lot, either beside each other or around in a scene, you're going to want to do this method, because this is going to be very, very important to not get that tiling and that texture tiling, fake CGI 2010 look. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our cube, and I just moved it. So we're going to do this again, add the cube in. Right now you can see we have a size of 2 meters. Let's do a size of 12. That seems like a good chunk for a concrete block. We may want to go up just a little bit more. So let's do 15. I want to get pretty similar to the one we have here, because I like how these textures are scaling. 15 meters, that could work. So what we're going to do, take that cube. So it's going to be a 15 by 15 cube and maybe 0.03 high. I'm going to take this material that we designed, and I believe it's this one. That looks right. And I'm just going to apply it to this cube right here. Awesome. Let's go back into render view. And now we can delete this original plane. We're no longer going to need that plane, because we're going to be working all on this one right here. Let me bring this down a bit. So what we're going to be doing is kind of modeling a little concrete block right here, and 0.03 looks pretty good to be doing this. What we're going to do first is apply the scale of this, just so we don't get any kind of weird beveling or anything like that. So we're going to be in object mode, and we're going to punch Control A. Make sure you're clicked on your object too. Control A, and we're just going to apply scale. So that way, when we tab into edit mode and we select the points, the edge points, and we'll just select this top surface right here, we're going to punch Control B for bevel, and we're just going to barely bevel it, and then add a good amount of subdivisions. It doesn't have to be a crazy amount. I added a few right there, and it's very sensitive. That's probably good right there. Tab out. Awesome. Left click, shade smooth. There we go. And now what we're going to do is start using the node editor to create different instances for this. So now what we're going to do is bring in our geometry node, and we're just going to take that, drop it in right there. And there's specifically one thing we want to get out of here, and it's our random per island. And I'm going to just pause this render view here for now while we set this scene up to have this work correctly. So the reason I'm going to be using the array modifier is it's procedural. So we're going to drop in 2 arrays, and then we're going to offset the first one on the x-axis and the second one on the y-axis. And now we have this 4x4 square that we generated. And if we want to add more tiles, we'll just go up to, let's say, 15 on one, and then we'll go up to 15 on the other right there. That was too much. Maybe, I don't know, 10? That's a lot. You have to remember we're working in meters here, so that's quite a bit. Oh, wait, that works pretty good right there. Let's go ahead and take this tile, move it there, and just center our object and our person somewhere in the middle. Oh, wait, we're going to re-click render on our scene, and we're going to zoom out a bit more. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift click, and we have our position, we have our normal, we have our tangent, all of these, but the one that I want is random per island. And look at that right there. We are getting different RGB values, or really not RGB values, just grayscale values. What we can do is convert this into kind of data for our location and rotation. So for this to work properly, we need to take this base color and somehow split it into 3 values that we can get that we can plug in here. So we're taking this one value and turning it into essentially vector values. Okay guys, so we have this random per island node, and there's something interesting about Blender that kind of took me a while to even realize, but there's different colored nodes here. And you might have been like, well, I already knew that. But do you realize what they mean? Because I didn't, I'll tell you, until I looked it up. So essentially we have three different colors. We have a yellow color, a gray color, and this purple color. And if you come over here, you see we have purple and gray. So gray colors represent one value. Yellow colors represent color, which is three values, red, green, and blue. And purple colors represent three values as well, and that's X, Y, and Z. What we can actually do here is we can convert this one value into a color value, mix that color value up to give it more information and data, kind of in the pipeline right here, and change our location, rotation, and scale of each texture on each tile separately. Now, that might be a little confusing, but I'll just show you right here. So what we're gonna do is pull in a mix RGB. We'll just shift A, search mix. If I can hit the M key, mix RGB right there. And we're gonna take our random per island, plug that into our factor. We're gonna output that on our mix right there. And if we click on color 1, you can see we have HSV. We wanna go to RGB because these are RGB values that we're working with. And we can just take our red down all the way and our green up all the way and our blue up all the way as well. And we can go here and we can take our red up all the way, our blue up all the way, and our green down all the way. And now we're getting different RGB values mapping or on each tile. What we can do with that is we can also pull in another texture, image texture. Let's see. We can just probably use one of the ones we have. Something like this is going to be a good example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this in. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that it's tiling on each one. And I'm just going to make this a little bit more contrasty so that we can just tell the difference. Let's pull this down right here. All right, so you can see we have this pattern tiling right here. Well, when we take this mix node, take the color and plug it into location, all of a sudden it switches it up on all the tiles because all the tiles have a different random per island value. We can also do this for our rotation value, which is right there. Now, if we zoom out a bit of a way, we have a bunch of random different locations, rotations, and not scale, but we could also do scale if we wanted to, for each texture. So now each texture is unique on each of these little islands, which is going to further break up the scene and help kind of add some more variation onto the existing image plane that we're working with, or the existing plane that we're working with. So what we're going to do to keep this scene more organized before we start plugging this into all these values, I'm going to hold the shift key and the right mouse button and drag that through right there. And now we have this little node tree that we can kind of jump off of. Another thing we're going to do this for is our other image texture. So that's our mapping right here. And we're going to pull that down into our rotation, or pull our rotation into it. And then also our location. So we're taking this we're taking this RGB color value, which has three values, and it's turning into an XYZ coordinates, and that's informing our texture to map randomly onto the surface. And you can kind of see that right there. So that kind of eliminates our tiling that we're going to be, we would be getting in the scene otherwise. So let's go ahead and let's output this roughness map again and kind of just fix that contrast we made in it, because I want to keep a lot of that detail there. And there you go. And then another interesting thing is our noise texture will automatically do its own thing. It's not going to tile because it's noise, it's procedural, and that's just how it works in Blender, which is very, very nice. You kind of see that right there with our puddles. They're not going to repeat no matter how many tiles we add, because each one is going to be overlaid and projected through Blender, and you can just see that right there. No tiling for that, so we don't need to worry about that at all there. So now if we output our principal material, we can kind of start setting up a scene that we like. So maybe something like this. Something that I want to do is I'm going to go back and change the scale of some of these, since we kind of scaled our tiles down a bit. some of these are looking a little dramatic. Perhaps I would like to take our noise texture and let's bring this down to like 4, maybe 2. I like the size of those. I'll do 2.5, happy medium. Those are pretty good size puddles. Maybe I'll drag this forward and up a little bit just to get some more variation there. I'll put our original texture. Awesome. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding some little cracks on the surface. And the best way to do that, I found, you can use noise to do it, but I like just using image textures with our random per tile method. So what we're going to do is add in another material, Shift A, and we're going to search material or principle, BSDF. Then we're going to bring in a Shift A mix shader. And there we go. So we're going to plug our top shader in right here, our bottom shader in right here. Control Shift click, and that's our output. Right now we're mixing at a factor of 0.5, so it's half one, half the other. Real quickly, what I'm going to do is just make this a crazy color. Change it up all the way. And I'm just going to take our specular off and our roughness all the way up. That way we just have this pink texture we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in some cracked asphalt. And what I want to do here is I'm going to take the normal map for it, which is right here, normal. And I'm going to put Shift A, search, and then I'm going to pull in a normal node. Oh, normal map node, not normal. And we'll just bring that in right there. Plug our color into color and our normal map into normal right there. Now you can see we have these cracks going along right here. You know, Control T, Node Wrangler, add on. We'll let you do that. We're going to take our UV, plug it in right there. And then we're going to take our random location and rotation and plug that in right there. And now we have this kind of, what do you want to call it? Cracks kind of being scattered along right here. However, they're a little too big for the scene, and the scale of our scene, actually very dramatically big. So what we're going to do is maybe do a 3, and a 3. Scale them down. Oh, maybe even more. We could do 5, 5, and 5. That looks pretty good right there like that. So now what we need to do is we need to find an efficient way to mix these two materials together. Because right now this normal map is just kind of being randomly scattered on that plane. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to search a color ramp. And we're going to plug that into our factor right here. Now, for this particular surface imperfection, it's damaged concrete floor, which is this right, or not damaged concrete floor, sorry, it's this asphalt right here. So inside of this file, you can see there's a lot of different things. We have an opacity file, which could come in handy. And I think that's the best option we have because it's already got that black and white value cut out. We could go in and create some contrast with one of these, like with the displacement or something like that. But I think the opacity is going to behave the best. So let's go ahead and take this opacity right here. Let's drop that in. And this is very common in like video game design, is like custom paint opacity. You can kind of think of this as texture painting. We're going to take the same vector with all the same information and plop it on, and they should line up perfectly, and they do. The reason we're not doing this separately is because then it would overlay correctly with our current bumps, our current texture, and then you just would get these weird breakups where it's really flat. So we're just going to go ahead and output everything right there. That looks good. I'm going to pull in a roughness map as well, and just drop that in right there. And I'm going to take the same data, click it into our roughness, and click our roughness in to here. That way we kind of have a material going. So now everything should be mixing accordingly And there we go. We got the cracks right there. You can kind of see them. They're a different color currently. But if we were to bring them down to the color of our concrete, which is something like that right there, we're starting to get these really interesting designs. And I need to take the saturation down all the way. So you can kind of start to see these cracks come into play right here. Now, that looks pretty good. There's a bit too much breakup than what I would like. I'm going to go to maybe our roughness right here. Shift A, search. Let's go ahead and search for color ramp. They're not looking reflective enough for me. So what I want to do is kind of bring in and maybe even invert this to make it look like there's water filling the holes of these cracks up. So something like this maybe. Just because our surface is very, very, very wet in this particular scene. And we'll just slide this around until we find something that fits what we're trying to do here. So now we've mixed this roughness in somewhere about here. The last thing we're going to do is take the specular and turn it up. What we can also do to break this up more is take our previous roughness map and just route that into our specular. And that'll create a little bit more breakups. Another thing we could do is bring in our own custom map, or we could even take this map right here and just bring that in and just add a little bit more variation and breakup on the surface. So if we go back to our original kind of view that we were looking at with our figure in front, we now have this really dynamic concrete floor texture. I'm still not exactly fully happy with these kind of breakups right here. So I'm just going to take this specular and just kind of mess around with it to get it to blend. And last thing that we can do is I sometimes run into with issues like this is you can tell that this opacity is kind of big and it's kind of letting a little too much in. So we could either scale it down again, and I might do that just a little bit to like 6, 6, and 6, somewhere right there. But another thing we could also do is we can break up this with our own noise. So we're going to punch Shift A, search, and we're going to add in a blender noise texture. And by the way, it's not like you have to do this for every scene. Just particularly if you're very particular about your materials like me and you really want it to feel and look realistic, sometimes you have to dive in and do stuff like this. So we're going to do a color mix, or mix RGB. And then I'm just going to copy this current color ramp, plop it in right there. So we're going to mix this with our opacity. So we have our noise texture. What we're going to do is we're going to create our noise texture, and it's going to be our mix factor. So we're going to take our factor, plug it into factor. We're going to take the color ramp, put it in between so we can create some contrast. Control Shift click, and there we go. We're going to output that right there. We want this to be black, so nothing gets through at all. We want just the cracks right here to appear. So what we can start doing is let's just output this. And the same thing as last time, we're just going to create some variation right here. So detail, that looks good right there. Scale, roughness, add a lot of roughness. We want some more black values to come through though, because we really want those cracks to go through all the way. And then we're going to output everything like that. And there we go. We have a lot more breakup inside of those cracks right there. Something else I'm going to do is go to this normal map right here, go to strength, and maybe take this down to like 0.3, just so it's not as obvious and kind of poking through as much. Then I'm going to take our current roughness right here, and I'm going to map that into these cracks. And that should also help that blend in a little bit better. And as far as specular goes, I'm going to match our current specular. What we could do is just do 0.5. We could also create our own custom specular map, but I'm actually pretty happy with where we've ended. And we've kind of gotten this very interesting floor material, which I actually might like more than what we created in the previous scene. So let's go and go to this right here. This is our opacity filter. I'm just gonna kind of crank that all the way there to the very end, just to eat into the opacity as much as possible. And it probably would help if we change this to a non-color space. There we go. And that should help a little bit with all of that blending. So guys, just like that, you can create these really convincing floor materials. Personally, I would probably work on this one a little bit more. I would look at breaking up maybe this specular map, but also keeping in mind our current roughness of these kind of puddles. So maybe mixing that roughness in the specular. The thing is you can go as far as you want with these materials. You know, you could set them up and take 30 seconds, or you could spend a good 10 to 15 minutes like we did on this one designing it. And then eventually you'll end up adding in some lights. For this particular scene, it's just an emission texture that I just stretched. Just a random image I found that with some nice colors. And then I added it on here. So guys, just like that, it's that simple to kind of add in these more interesting surfaces than kind of what you start off with. And I really think it adds a lot to the scene and makes it very, very dynamic. Remember guys, if you want to support the channel or just you want more Blender content in general, you can check out the Patreon. We also have some assets for sale online if you're interested in clouds, planets, or even landscapes, all made by us. So you can go check that out yourself. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope that this was informative and helpful. I'm looking forward to doing more Blender tutorials in the future. This was a lot of fun and we got a great render out of it. Peace out.